Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Fuelarts online broadcast webinars. My name is Denis Belkevich. I'm the general partner, co-founder, and CEO of Fuelarts, and with me, Sonia Stubblebine, our charming co-host and project manager of Fuelarts. So last week, we introduced a special series of our webinars focused on the diversity of the Tezos ecosystem. These webinars will introduce you to the managers, creators, founders, artists, and technical experts working to develop the #1 blockchain for the arts. And at the same time, we'll be working throughout the next months with the startups of the first batch of the Fuelarts and Tezos accelerator that starts next Monday. So it's my great pleasure to remind you about the partners of the batch. First of all, Amadeo Global, New York-based investment firm focused on public and private companies responsible for putting together thousands of investors for the demo day. Educate Me, a platform, a Ukrainian platform that gathers live sessions, lessons, content, and assignments for learners in a single space. Happy to introduce you Unstoppable Domains, one of the most talked about startups of 2022, our infrastructural partner of the batch, the Web3 domain provider. So Unstoppable Domains offer NFT domains that give people full ownership and control of their digital identity. Let's move to our technical partners, Nomadic Labs, tech partner of the batch, one of the largest research and development centers within the Tezos ecosystem. Radio Button, tech partner of Fuelarts from Germany, which successfully develops the most ambitious and scalable tech projects. Tezos Art Management is a team of producers and strategists managing international art projects and delivering PR services. One of our media partners, Metaverse Post, they supply the market with the hottest Web3 news. Feel free to subscribe and enjoy. And the last four partners are represented by the mentors, by some of the mentors of the upcoming batch. So Blockchain Art, represented by Christina Steinbrecher-Pfand. This is a trustworthy network for the art world where you can discover, buy, and sell digital artworks online. Bull Perks, represented by Konstantin Kogan, a decentralized VC and multi-chain launchpad focused on gamify. ArtPay, represented by its founder, Natasha Rotman-Letourneur, the former business development director at ArtNet and Collectroom. So they provide elegant financial and technology tools for the global art market. And finally, Artcryption, represented by Vandana Taksali, the platform to sell, protect, and share creative assets and IP online. Vandana is one of the most appreciated and known crypto lawyers, NFT lawyers, so she'll be responsible for legal mentorship. So our second dive into the Tezos ecosystem, we decided to devote to the Tezos Foundation, which stands as part of the community in support of the Tezos protocol ecosystem. And it's my great pleasure to invite a Chief Commercial Officer at the Tezos Foundation, Mason Edwards. Hi, Mason.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for the partnership between us. So Mason is a Cambridge University engineer graduate, a serial entrepreneur, and a public speaker and mentor. So we know that your interests are within the application of technology innovation with the specialization in digital transformation across industry verticals. But we hope to explore that and the mission of the foundation in our further discussion. So our first question to you is, could you please share a bit about the Tezos Foundation's mission, vision, and plans, in particular for 2023?
Yeah, of course. Where to start? It's a big bunch of questions. I mean, the Tezos Foundation's mission has remained unchanged in that it's here to promote and facilitate the adoption of the Tezos blockchain technology, right? And that ranges quite broadly from supporting engineering efforts all the way through to adoption, marketing, and so on and so forth. It does this mostly through the grants vehicle. So the Tezos Foundation is quite small in and of itself, but it uses its network of grantees, some permanent and recurring and very large, and some small, to basically facilitate that mission from providing core tech to large adoption entities like TrioTech you may have heard of, or the business development at Nomadic Labs.
Great. You've mentioned, right, that it's a bunch of questions. So the second part of the question, please let me remind it, like the plans for 2023 for the Tezos Foundation.
Yeah, of course. Sorry. So I think it's got a few prongs to it. One of them is kind of the technical and engineering side. So we have strong ambitions for our scalability. There'll be a demo shortly that shows off our ability to reach 1 million TPS with scalable rollups. And this is important, and it can be a bit of a pause in thought where you kind of wonder why such a scalability is required when we don't hit maximum throughput at the moment. It's partly because, one, I believe we will in time, but also that there are plenty of use cases which aren't something one could really approach on blockchains when the scalability hasn't hit that kind of high up echelon levels. So the example that's often given is if you were going to build a computer game, and rather than have a very surface level NFT integration, you were going to have a very deep one where the entire economy runs on chain and every in-game currency movement is represented on chain. That would be a lot of transactions. Your average successful MMORPG would dwarf the throughput of many chains. So, you can see that opens up the opportunity to build things we don't yet have as well. So we're pretty excited about that. In terms of the other side of the coin, which is more the adoption focus, we have some core verticals, and that's going to be sports, gaming, art, and DeFi. And there's also kind of like lifestyle in there as well, and culture. And I think that falls within art. So it includes like music and such. But, as most people will be aware who are fans of the network or are getting to know us, art's been a massive success story for this ecosystem. And so here doth lie the main challenge that I face every day, which is you can't buy a community like we have in art. That's not something which you can funnel money into and it will get bigger either. But it's also nonetheless extremely important to facilitate them. Like, how do we take this thing we have that's very meaningful, really demonstrates real use of blockchain, is an actual community, has value to it, and help it grow in a way that doesn't spoil what we have? And that's why programs like this are very useful. Programs like our previous relationships with Art Basel, they're ways to kind of facilitate the growth of the ecosystem without, interrupting the organic growth that seems to happen on its own.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And we also would like to ask you, what factors does Tezos Foundation look for when they consider startups for grants or investments?
Yeah. So, unlike a traditional investment vehicle, which is going to care about its returns, I'm not against returns, and they certainly will help fund the ecosystem for years to come, I'm sure. But one of our primary focuses is going to be what impact this will have to the network. How is this going to help further that? So this can take many forms. Sometimes a grant can be purely based on technical merit. We could decide that what's being built is a public good. And that I mean that this is going to be useful for many projects to come. And people will need something like this in different things they build. The classic go-to example could have been like an indexer. And so it's meaningful to create grants for these kind of things. But on the other side, sometimes it can be community efforts, onboarding more artists in cultural hubs around the world and holding hackathons and events to do that. Totally non-technical, but nonetheless an important way that we can help spread the message and indeed the work of our existing artists around the world. So we kind of take that into consideration. The other factors will be very familiar to traditional investment vehicles like VC firms and other grant-given bodies. And that'll just be kind of an assessment of the capacity of the team to deliver, how it fits into our existing spread of projects, the quality of the application, and those kind of things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mason. I wonder, has the foundation's investment thesis changed in light of the current market conditions? I mean, the bear market.
Yeah, I mean, it's a straight to the meat of all the questions, right? Look, it's obviously been a downturn in the markets. I think to ignore that is foolish. But nonetheless, we've always tried to make sure that the investments and grants that we give are done, against the criteria of them being as useful as possible per dollar to the ecosystem. And so that ambition hasn't changed. And the foundation still has a very meaningful treasury behind it, and it's a very well managed treasury. And I foresee that it will have that ability to provide the service to the ecosystem for a long time to come. That said, we have to also be honest that it's not reasonable to spend the same budget per year against verticals, against engineering, against grants that may have been useful in the previous bull run, as it is now in a slightly more tempered market. So we do have to rationalize those costs, because we would, of course, want the foundation to be here for years to come. So, there will be some pullback, no doubt, but we're not aggressively tied to the movement of the markets. And like I said, the foundation is well managed. So there should be minimal impact, even if this is to last some time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Also, would love to ask you a general question. What is the current state of Tezos ecosystem? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I think it's in this kind of phase of moving on from early adopter to kind of starting to really thrive. And I think that's awesome. And this varies a little bit vertical by vertical. We've got some very cool games launching, for example. But I would still say that our gaming space is slightly newer than our arts vertical. And so it really depends which slice of the pie you take. But there was a recent survey that was done that demonstrated that Tezos was one of the most loved cryptocurrencies across the planet. Unfortunately, not in the UK, so we need to fix that. But I'll still take the victory. I think we were 4th globally, and we're still 5th top social volume in terms of being spoken about as a chain. So I would say that's a thriving community, and it's a community that also really helps each other, which is always very meaningful to see. You can tell just by observing some of the Twitter traffic that a lot of artists who have success aren't quick to run away with that. They're quick to find a way to bring that back to the ecosystem, and the companies look to support the artists, such as Object and FX Hash. So it's a meaningful almost microcosm of growth and entrepreneurship. So I'd say we're doing really well, and I'm very happy with it.
Sounds very inspiring. Thanks.
Thank you, Mason. In 2022, we were witnessing a lot of exciting projects that were launched on Tezos. So could you please tell us more about most important of them, for instance, about the Manchester United digital collectibles powered by your blockchain?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. I wouldn't want to not include some of the really meaningful projects that have also scaled up a lot in that time, like FX Hash and Object.com. ArtDex, which was pretty fun to see grow. And obviously lots of new artworks and new programs and projects coming through that way. A couple of games. I could go on for hours just listing the things I like, but I'll give a brief, overview of Manchester United, of course. I think it was a pretty big success. There's much more that needs to be done, but you have to start and then grow from that good seed crystal. And I think the way we started was to kind of approach what could fan engagement look like for a major sports team. I mean, Manchester United has 1 billion fans. It's an enormous number of people and reach that, we have to be very careful not to run in and try and grab every fan we can on the onset. We have to build this thing in a steady way with a long-term vision. And Manchester United have been really good partners in doing this. So you may have seen the launch of the Devils. I felt this was a nice blending of kind of a digital identity, a way for fans to kind of be a part of the club and engage, a vehicle where more utility and other aspects of the project can be brought to life in time. And that was a big success. We had 700,000 keys claimed, which was kind of the precursor and free drop before the Devils PFP. And then the Devils sold out. So that's been good to see. And I think that's also kind of told the rest of the fans who might be observing this, who are perhaps a little bit unsure to get too quickly involved into crypto and blockchain, which can be scary things from the outside, that was a meaningful project. And it had meaningful value to each fan who enjoyed it. And so I'm pretty sure when we look to do the next project, we'll have a wider audience and then a wider audience and a wider audience before those 1 billion fans enjoy Tezos every day, which is the aspiration.
And can we expect something more from this collaboration? Is there something happening in the future?
Oh yeah, of course. But that's as much as I'll say on it. But yeah, it wasn't a one-stop shop. The idea here, and we approach this in the same way with a lot of partnerships, that it's not exciting to do a one-trick pony. We could very quickly come in and like set out a crazy amount of IP and do a big splash, but like not build any longevity. And the reason why that's not meaningful is for me, what's going to be powerful is when the foundation is, a much smaller thing. It's many, many years into the future. But what exists is this vibrant ecosystem around Tezos that's, maintained and basically bolstered by the dApps and companies and programs that build on it from their own version. And Manchester United could certainly be one of those. And so what I want to do is I want to build a long-term sort of model for them of fan engagement that is actually something that's meaningful outside of any involvement from the foundation in the future. And it should certainly be a meaningful signal to other clubs, not just in football, but across sports that, hey, this is how you do fan engagement, and it's worth doing. It's almost like the dawn of social media for these clubs, where the initial skepticism is like, do we really want to be on Instagram and Twitter? Is that worth our time? Our newsletter is great. People love the paper newsletter. It's like, okay, that may have been true, and it may have been a bit of a steady curve to get growing in the social space, but it's now a position where not having an online presence as one of these clubs, not having a social media account, would be complete fan suicide. So, I think we're building a world where that's true for blockchain, and we're building it on Tezos.
Mason, I have my special personal attitude towards Manchester United because in my childhood, that was my favorite international football club, thanks to Peter Schmeichel, who was my favorite goalkeeper. I also was playing as a goalkeeper when I was a kid. So I'm happy for Manchester United having such a partner. Let's shift our conversation towards the main advantages of Tezos blockchain. So which of them would you like to highlight?
Yeah, so I think, like, especially from the perspective of this being an art accelerator, I don't think you should not consider something that's not necessarily native to Tezos itself in terms of technology, but is more a fact that because of the technology, because of us being one of the first proof of stake blockchains, we have a reputation for being green, a reputation for being meaningful. And what that actually built was a real community. Like, you can see other arts communities and other chains, and I never think it's a positive thing to speak ill of competition, so I won't do that. But if you think of our community, it's vibrant and it's very real, and it's not just trading things on the basis of speculation. It's trading things like NFTs and creating NFTs because the artists have a medium they want to use and collectors have something they want to have. And that, you can tell that in the way that we've performed during the bear markets, still hitting all-time highs on NFTs, which is frankly just a really big testament that this is becoming a world where the technology is empowering a thing. It's not just about playing with the technology in a kind of less sincere way. So that's definitely a reason to consider building our applications on Tezos. We have a vibrant ecosystem and an audience who are hungry for more of this kind of innovation. You can see it in the way FX hash just exploded. I mean, even in a non-Web3 world, the kind of numbers that they demonstrated would have been unbelievable in a Web2 world. Their growth was astronomical. I think they did their millionth mint within 8 weeks of launching. I mean, I've had the pleasure of being an angel and being part of VC committees for a long time now, and seeing traction like that is extremely rare. Because you've got to think, that's not like 1 million users in 8 weeks. That's 1 million mints. That's 1 million activations on chain. That doesn't, it's not expensive on Tezos, but there is a cost for someone to do that, both creatively in creating the work and a tiny financial one in gas fees. So it's really a meaningful traction thing. But I digress. So it's definitely the community that's something to care deeply about. In terms of technology, Tezos has always had a reputation as a engineering ecosystem of delivering consistently and stably. So one of the things that I found very compelling when I joined this ecosystem was that my former background, aside from the startup stuff, has been kind of in a B2B sales world. I worked at Google, I worked at Palantir. These are kind of the pedigree institutions for bringing technology to existing incumbents, like banks and such. And one of the most important conversations you would have is around, stability of upgrades. And I don't mean that in terms of like, is your upgrade stable? I mean it in, do I know when you're going to upgrade? And do I know by what circumstances it's going to happen? And can I plan for it? Because if you can't plan these things, it becomes very hard to build a long-term business off the back of it. Now, if you were going to build a remittance framework in some institution like a large bank, right, with billions of dollars being transferred, and I was just going to tell you, hey, look, at some point, at an arbitrary and unknown time in the future, there will be an upgrade that will involve a network fork. Now, I can't tell you which fork is going to be the one that you should pick. It's probably this one, but we won't know for sure just yet. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, and I can't tell you exactly what's going to be in it. And I also can't say with any reliability like that your assets won't split. It doesn't seem to be a big problem in an agile, small Web3 world, but I can tell you it's a scary proposition for a large bank, for example. And so I do think that Tezos has, very meaningful advantages that are brought from on-chain governance to be a place where you build things, and you build things with lasting long-term business cases, and you know that this technology is not going to become redundant. It has a history of upgrading. It's going to be kept at the forefront. And so I think that's going to be a meaningful reason for Tezos to build. People to build on Tezos, sorry. And then obviously on-chain governance in and of itself is a pretty special thing. I think it's very meaningful that people who contribute to the network and participate in the network have a capacity to influence the direction of the network. I think that's a good paradigm for technology in general. And I think it's one of the reasons that people have a kind of a connection to Tezos on a very visceral level.
Thank you. We noticed a lot of passion in this particular reply. So
there's a lot of great things about Tezos. So
sure.
You're going to get passionate. If you're not passionate about what you do, then find something else to do, right?
Absolutely. Also, we'd like to talk about the NFT use cases that you're personally excited about. What are those cases? What would you love to tell today?
Yeah, so I mean, there's no need to be necessarily fancy. I'm just a big fan of the art I collect. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest collector in Tezos. I'm probably most certainly not. But I collect a lot. My wife studied history of art, and so historically in our relationship, sorry to overshare, she's been the art collector and definitely held that trophy high. But I think I've surpassed in number of pieces collected now, and I display them around my house, and I enjoy having them. And it's very meaningful for me to keep those things. So don't discourage it because it's simple. It's a real use case, and it makes a lot of sense to have digital ownership of art. Especially in my case, I enjoy it when the artwork itself treats the NFT as a medium, not just a mechanism. So what I mean by that is that it's less exciting, in my opinion, to take a photograph of an existing oil on canvas that you've already sold as a new way to sell the same piece. Okay. It's more exciting when you create some digital art, whether you drawn that through a pad or it's a fully rendered model. And previously that would have been something that's very hard to own, in the same way that a photography can be quite hard to own. So it's really exciting that NFTs make that in something that can be done quite easily. And then aside from that, as people have probably heard me say before, I'm a big gamer, and I think the gaming use cases are really cool and really meaningful. All the way from cosmetic skins, right down to ideas where you can have provenance of items. So a meaningless item in the game can suddenly be the item that's controlling a guild and controls access to the Discord outside the guild, and has history of being an item held by certain characters through the game and killed a world boss, and you name it. I think that's a really exciting paradigm for gaming. And the interesting thing is there's a ton of overlap. So when I look at the Tezos ecosystem, I kind of draw parallels to why I think Apple succeeded. Apple succeeded for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that was really cool is they really created a world that cherished and facilitated the designers and the creatives to, have a run at it and make amazing stuff. And in a way, we've done kind of the same thing here. We have all these creatives and artists. And so my theory is that these will be the people who build the best-in-class dApps, the best-in-class things. They'll partner with, a lot of them are competent engineers themselves, of course, but they'll partner with teams as well and be really, keystones in making sure that usability and, polish is there in everything that's built in this ecosystem. And you can see in that the quick overlap that happens between games and our existing artist community. I'm pretty sure that the games we have tomorrow will leverage the artistic talent on the network today for all of its assets and creatives. I'm just going to run and grab some water. You can probably tell I've got a bit of a cough brewing, but I'll just be a second.
Sure. Good. Meanwhile, we have the question from one of our mentors, from Jeff Ashman, who will be responsible for investor relations. Yes, Mason. So meanwhile, we have a question from one of our mentors of the upcoming batch. They are listening to you very attentively. So their activity confirms that. So Jeff is asking, and Jeff will be responsible for investment relations of the startups. So there has been a lot of discussion on what is the next big thing. So what area does Mason in particular and Tezos believe will be the next great area for Tezos ecosystem to explore?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard question to answer, right? Like if I knew exactly what that is, you'd see I'd wield my influence to try and get a grant up on the grants page for it absolutely immediately. Because obviously we'd want to try and get people to do that. The truth is that in this space right now, it's so prime for innovation. There are so many things that are yet untapped. And the way I like to think about what blockchain seems to have been doing, and this actually comes from a place that I was an early blockchain skeptic. So I'm certainly a convert these days. But it seems to be picking up use cases as time goes on. And these use cases seem to be very sticky. So, art's a good example. When I first heard about blockchains, that wasn't something that, smart contracts weren't really a thing. And even when I heard about Ethereum, certainly the idea of NFTs weren't really a thing. And so it's the case that it's through experimentation we're finding these meaningful use cases that don't seem to disappear. And that means over time, we're going to accumulate a really big mass of meaningful things to do on chain. That said, I think there's a lot of very obvious places to look. I'd say that probably focusing more on the art side, given the context of this talk. I think there's a nice overlap that hasn't been explored too much. I say too much because there has been some recent movements there now between decentralized finance and art. Everything from understanding what a floor price really means, insurance, to lending and loaning to galleries, lending and loaning on the work, fractionalization. I think that stuff's kind of really interesting. I'm not sure if it's too early and if that's not going to cotton on, but I certainly think it's an interesting place to look and explore. So yeah, that's a good one. The next one is probably display is something I think is cool. I'm probably not backed up in this opinion by everyone, but I think that people love to display their art as a kind of demonstration that they own it, as a social status symbol. So more meaningful ways to display art is always cool.
Thank you. And as you know, we are about to enroll several startups who are dealing with DeFi and art finance to our batch. So yeah, we'll be exploring the future opportunities during the next months within the accelerator. And we have the second question traditionally from the artistic side of the ecosystem. So regarding the digital artists.
So yeah, they're asking where newbie artists can start, and do we have some introductory program to pilot them?
Yeah, that's something I care a lot about, and I think we can do more here. There are some resources for how to mint and where you can look in the ecosystem. So I'll have someone follow up and make that send out a list of resources after the call for everyone that we should probably broadcast. But my other bit of advice here is the best way to start understanding how to create art on Tezos is probably to start collecting art on Tezos. So head over to FX Hash, head over to Object, head over to Hen, have a look what people are doing, what's popular, what's everyone talking about. Join the kind of Twitter space. I don't mean literal Twitter spaces. I mean just join the conversation, and you'll get a feeling for what's currently popular, what mediums work, what's had challenges. And the beauty of doing this, as well as getting to own some wonderful art, is that you can start collecting on Tezos and experimenting with new things like generative art at very low prices. Given that the gas fees in Tezos are so negligible, that means the prices of art can indeed be lower. Obviously, a renowned artist will still have high priced work, but there's plenty of stuff to explore there for people just getting started in this.
Thank you, Mason. And we have a question from one of the founders of the existing startups successfully working on Tezos, Ryan Tanaka. So there has been a few attempts in the industry, including some of my projects. Sure, Ryan, we know about it. And to use NFTs as digital certificates of authenticity for physical artworks. Is this an idea that you think might have traction in the future?
Yeah, I do. It's, let's see. I think we have to be honest in the approach. So look, having an NFT certification for a piece of artwork doesn't make forgery impossible, right? Like that's the first thing we got to admit to ourselves, right? Because if we put the technology first and pretend it's something it's not, then we're building a kind of strawman sandcastle thing here. And that's because, like, effectively, you can't meaningfully bind the physical object to the NFT in such a way that the physical object can't be switched out to a fake. But that said, that's true for paper certifications and logbooks held at like Sotheby's and Christie's. Like that's also true there. So it doesn't make that system part of it better, but it does mean that that's okay, and there's still a lot of value to be had in having ownership on chain. A lot, really, honestly. And I think it's much more transparent, and I think that's really meaningful. I think that it's easier to transfer, and it's not, it's immutable. It can't be altered or destroyed very easily. So lots of pros to be had. I think we've got to work out exactly how those pros make it better than the existing system. And that becomes your point of sale, like why we're doing this. And so, yeah, I put a lot of clout into it. The only other thing I'd say is that I've seen a few instances of this where, due to kind of like a institution's inability to want to get too involved in the blockchain in question is private, at which point I think that diminishes the value proposition of the whole use case. So you got to do the hard work and do it on a public blockchain like Tezos. Do it in the way that it's actually real, and then I think there's a lot of value to be had.
Thank you, Mason. Yeah, everyone is happy with the answers, with your answers to their questions. Great. So that was very informative, and that was very professional. Thank you. I will encourage everyone to visit Tezos.Foundation website for more information about the activity of the Tezos Foundation. Also, to download the reports which Tezos Foundation publishes. I mean, year report and quarter report to know more about the perspectives of the startups supported by the grants. And yeah, and also I should admit that in our upcoming Fuelarts and Tezos, in our upcoming Fuelarts Startups Report 2023, which will be released in a month, there will be a special section focused on the Tezos art ecosystem, including diagrams, including direct quotes, including case studies. So explore more with Tezos. Thank you again, Mason.
No, thank you. And if anyone wants to hear me ramble more about my passion for Tezos, feel free to follow me on Twitter as well. It's just Edwards Mason. But great. Thank you so much for the time.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you around.
Thank you. Bye.